Good evening. I'm Charles Payne. President Trump kicked off the first business day of his presidency, meeting with top business leaders, and while he ended it speaking with union bosses. Trump vowed his executive actions to withdraw the U.S. from TPP and other incentives for companies to manufacture their products on U.S. soil will greatly benefit union workers.
We're going to have a lot of plant expansion and a lot of brand new plants. We met with the head of Ford today, the head of many of the great companies, Johnson & Johnson. They're very, very excited about what we're doing. You guys will be responsible for getting those plants built in 9 months instead of 18 years.
So, did the Democrats just lose their union base? Here to discuss the political and economic ramifications of all today's White House events, Brian Brenberg, Heather Higgins, Ford O'Connell, and Van Hipp. We've got competing articles here, so I'm going to go with Heather first, Van, but we're going to talk about yours. But Heather wrote a piece talking about the promise of President Trump. The first full business day, are you happy with what we saw? We didn't get 200 executive orders, but I think what we saw was a pretty good preview of things to come.
No, I'm thrilled. We had a piece that was in USA Today that we talked about, and actually the first executive order on health care was exactly what I had hoped he would do. The meeting today is clearly, one of the points I make is that this is the first president we have who totally understands marketing and branding. This was a clearly well thought out day that underscored his message and underscored the fact that he was the president of all of America, not just a partisan president, by bringing in the union leaders, by bringing in the business guys, and having a very different outlook on the role of business in American life, where it's not the enemy that needs to be regulated and sucked dry for taxes, but a source of security and opportunity and jobs that benefit all Americans.
In fact, you also said progressives are doing Mr. Trump a great favor, displaying their contempt not only for him but his voters, and it's going to make him easier to be the people's president. And on that note, Van Hipp, you wrote that now Mr. Trump is now not your president. Don't forget, don't leave the forgotten Americans behind. Of course, referring back to a quote that Richard Nixon made a long time ago. Do you think he did that today? You think he set the right tone where you have these big-time CEOs, but you also have union workers, many of who, ironically, had never even been invited to the White House?
He's off to a great start, Charles, and I think one thing's for sure. This is not a low-energy president. This is a high-energy president who listens. He's listening to the CEOs. He's hands-on. He's asked them to come back in 30 days with ideas to stimulate our economy from a manufacturing standpoint. And you're right. I argue in my piece that besides keeping America safe, his top priority has got to be to rebuild the economy in rural America and in the Rust Belt. And when I see him appointing people like Wilbur Ross to be the Secretary of Commerce, someone who has gone into areas that have been decimated economically, and bought and revitalized industries and worked with unions and revitalized the economy, people like Peter Navarro as the head of the National Trade Council, I think he realizes that he can't let these people down. They're the ones who elected him, and I think they saw it as the last chance to save the America that they once knew. You
know, Wilbur Ross, of course, famous for going into the most distressed of areas that completely written off by everyone. He's made a fortune doing that, and he's built and saved jobs in the process. Brian, from a business point of view, all right, you got these CEOs there. Liveris from the CEO of Dow Chemical kind of cobbled together this crew. And what I found interesting is if you look at the most recent quarter, Dow Chemical, his company, 65% of their business comes from outside. It came from outside of the United States. Johnson & Johnson, a big chunk, almost half their business from outside the United States. International Paper, I think the name says it all. So within 30 days, how do these guys come back with a plan that says, I do a lot of business in China. Can I build a factory there, at least for my Chinese workers?
Well, I think what they have to do is they have to make the case that the regulatory cuts can really be big here in terms of helping American businesses come back. They love the sound of that. And frankly, I think it's the most important thing Trump is talking about right now. So they have to go back and say, look, if you can really do this regulation piece right, it's going to be great for us. We're going to reinvest. It's going to be great for new business startups. And it's even going to be great for those the union fellows that you have in your office with you. Everybody wins here. Let's focus on that win-win-win and not something that could create a win-lose situation.
You know, on that note, Ford, Barack Obama, he leveled regulations that add up to over $800 billion a year. So when President Trump talks about removing 75% of it, yeah, that's certainly music to the ears of any manufacturer, home builder, or any business, or anybody out there looking for a job.
No, you're absolutely right. Look, Charles, when was the last time union leaders and business leaders came away from the White House happy? I think it was 1984. And this is a great way to go. If you want to unleash 4% economic growth in America, you're going to have to focus on 3 sectors. That's going to be manufacturing, energy, and tech. And they've been hobbled greatly by regulations. I think the other great thing that President Trump also said was that he wants to drop the corporate tax code from 35% to 15 to 20%. Obviously, the devil's in the details. But I think we're off to a strong start on day one of Donald Trump trying to make the case that he wants to unleash jobs, higher wages, and American economic growth going forward.
Here's the thing, though, Brian. There's some economic purists out there saying, hey, if we go down to 15, 20%, you're talking about serious deficits where the debt's going to balloon. We're going to be in a whole lot of trouble, especially if we don't take something like the border adjustment tax, which might have brought in $1 trillion and a couple other things. So how does he square this, even within his own party?
He's got to get serious about where they're going to cut spending. And, you know, he hasn't talked about, he's made promises around Medicare, for example, and Social Security. It's tough now because that's where you're really going to get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of being able to cut costs. Those are the long-term programs where the spending really is. He has talked about spending cuts. He's going to have to get serious about it because you're right. When you do corporate tax reform, you are going to lose out on some revenue there, and you've got to find a way to plug that hole.
What do you want to see now, Heather? We saw day one. I think by all accounts it's a hugely successful day. Beyond the energy that Van Hipp talked about, was he hit the key areas that people wanted to see hit. Now, there are a whole lot of other things that a lot of people are really hoping for, especially these tax breaks.
Well, I think that I would disagree with you ever so slightly because, yes, in a static model, you really lose revenue if you cut your rates, but you also have a lot of money that can finally be repatriated and come back and be used towards a growing economy. But as Donald Trump himself said, or President Trump, now that we should be calling him that, regulations are even more important than tax policy. And we have had the wrong model on regulatory policy. So the interstate highway system took 10 years to approve and build. It now takes 10 years just to do the approval. It's all this obsessive micromanagement on a lot of rules that make absolutely no impact, and they're a waste of everybody's time and effort, but hugely expensive and a real deterrent to constructive effort because we've taken human responsibility out of it. So I hope that Philip Howard and his proposals that he has been advancing get high play, because then we won't just be talking about getting 1 or 2 for every one that we put in. We might be getting rid of 20 for every one that we put in, and they will be better, smarter, and actually do the job that these regulations are supposed to accomplish.
Van, how do you want to see the rest of the week play out?
Hey, this is a great first business day. I want to see this continue, and it's great to have a Republican president who is not advocating Wall Street capitalism, but who is advocating Main Street capitalism. That's how we're going to rebuild this country and put people to work and erase a $20 trillion deficit.